on one hand, I wanted to share that like so many people don't want to talk to strangers because, to your point, they don't think they have anything to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Just being them is not enough.
Yeah.
And if that resonates with anyone, I just want to tell you, you're forgetting that you showing up is bringing your light.
Hello, and welcome to In the Rising podcast. My name is Bettina Brown, and this is the platform I've chosen to talk about living a life that's in alignment with your hopes, your dreams, and your goals. Really, that vision that you have that you're kind of jealous of sometimes that other people look like they have, but the one you really know in your heart you desire the most. And my guest today is Jen Nash, and she is an awesome guest. She's funny, she's spunky, but she really hits on points that are so relevant to so many people. She calls herself connector in chief because she really believes in small connections with other people, and small connections within yourself can help you have a more fulfilled life. So welcome to this podcast, and I'm so excited for you to hear from Jen. Well, thank you, Jen Nash, for being on In the Rising podcast. I'm really thrilled and honored to speak with you today because I have your bio. I have 2 pages of different things that I took some notes on to read. You're a speaker, an author, executive coach, and you have personally built up your own multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. And it goes on and on and on. And I also just love that you are really big on connections, right? So I'd love to talk about that. But first of all, welcome to In the Rising. Thank you for your time.
Oh, Bettina, thank you so much. And thank you so much for putting your efforts and energy into this. I love the mission of In the Rising. I think what you're doing and sharing is touching people's lives. So thank you for including me here.
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I'll take that. I'll take that compliment.
You should.
Thank you. I have so many notes. And I'm just going to put them down because I'm just going to look, it's a podcast, but I'm going to look at you and just say, what would you say, when you were going through, like you said, you were born in Canada, you've lived in different places. I was born in Germany. I lived in different places. So that resonated for me. Would you say that your childhood has really transformed who you are today by living in these different areas?
Yeah, I would. I think for the good and the bad of it, it's funny when people are talking about moving their children around and they're like, oh, I can't possibly take her out of high school. It would be just so disruptive. But, if you don't have a choice and you're pulled out of high school, junior school, kindergarten, I think you're really forced to seek connection and community very quickly. Mm-hmm. So, I think people who know me well think of me as bold and incredibly direct. Historically, some find me, too much so, but I think it's because at a young age, you're rushing to try and find, a warm heart who's going to accept you, so you're just like, let's skip the awkward, I don't know yous and have lunch. But, for a 10-year-old, this is a big ask. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure, did you have that experience moving around so much?
Yeah. So, my father was in the Army. And so we moved around Germany, we moved to the States, we moved back to Germany, we moved back to the States. And yes, you're right. When you said bold and direct, that is exactly how people define me. That you will always know where you stand.
Well, that's probably also the German part in you.
That is probably a lot of it. I tone it down as much as I can, but because it's very upfront there. But I hear you because you have to build this connection and when you're forced in that, you have to learn to adapt to change because it's sad sometimes to leave friends, to leave family, to restart it. I'm not taking away that. No. But change is then part of your DNA, and that you're usually, when I've done research on people who move around a lot, that they tend to be a lot more risk takers than other people. part of their story.
But I mean, imagine if all of us just grew up in the same school, in the same town, with the same friends. Like, what would life be like? Because you wouldn't have people that were actually sort of crossing streams, who were shifting things, who brought new ideas in. You know, we are the pollinators, Bettina, you and I. We are out there shifting, pollinating. And I don't know if you had this experience, but I know I did. Like, I fell madly in love with my grade 8 high school. And when my parents said we were pulling me out, I stopped talking to them and started writing a novel where I killed my dad off. You know, this is a very angry 14-year-old. And then 2 years later, we went back to said high school because we moved back to North America, and we went to the school, and it felt like a time warp. Mm-hmm. I felt like I had changed and grown and shifted, and they were all in stasis. Mm-hmm. And I said to my mom, I said, I don't think I want to go there anymore. They're the same, and I feel so different. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because she was like really proud of me for having that moment. So I'm sure you have growing moments where you realized your environment contributed to your evolution.
Yes, absolutely. And when it does, you have to embrace it for what it is. And it's not bad for those that are not, I guess, privileged also to move around, is how I'm going to say it. But you're just different. You're just different when you've seen the moon from the other side of the planet or another continent. There's just something about that process. And you have a lot of shifting still.
Yeah.
How, walk us through a little bit, like how this all evolved. You went to said high school and
okay, so yeah, like how did I end up sort of a rolling stone? I mean, I moved around a lot. My dad worked for a large Canadian conglomerate. He became an international head of marketing for Asia. So we moved around for his work. And then I ended up in New York for college, and I just fell in love with New York City. Like, I was just like, oh, these are my people. This is my town. I love everything about this place. And so I lived here from the time I was 18 until the time I was 34. I did take a job at one point in Texas. And so I lived in Texas, but I still had my apartment here. But then at 34, I moved to Pennsylvania, and I took, I quit my 6-figure job. I know this is where you're like risk takers. I quit my 6-figure consulting job, and I don't remember what he paid me, but it was something terrible. Like, I don't know. It was very, very small. Let's just go with that. I don't want to put a judgment on it, but I was shocked. But I lived rent free because I was doing an internship with a real estate mogul who owned 216 unit townhome complexes, one in Ohio and one in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And so I was like, wow, and the really freaky thing for a New Yorker was having to buy a car. So that was a whole thing. And so I ended up in Pottstown, and literally within 3 months, I met someone, and I went on a vacation actually by myself and reconnected with an old friend who was like, you're doing all of this stuff to learn about real estate. Stop learning about real estate. Just go do it. And so at that point, I came back from that vacation, quit the terrible job making no money, and ended up dating the guy that I had met for the next 13 years. And we bought and renovated homes because I had this vision for how I was not going to be poor when I retired. Yeah. And I literally read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and was like, yup. And then I read his next book, Cash Flow Quadrant. I bought the game, Cash Flow Quadrant. I played it twice. I won. They say you have to play it twice and win it twice. So I was like, okay. Did that. And I was like, I guess I'm good at this. Great. And I kept my day job, though, in advertising. So I used my day job to feed and ground my ability to buy homes and renovate them. And in the 2000s, you could get mortgages very quickly. Mm-hmm. It was very easy. So the timing and the universe, aligned to allow me to do this. But at the same time, like, I was reading the MLS listings every day. I understood the areas. I knew what I was looking at. And I had a partner who, if I said, you got to go down there right now, you got to go down there and you got to look at this house and tell me if it's something we can do, he would go, he would look at it, and he would say, yeah, I can do that. And I would buy the house sight unseen the next day. Like I bought most of my houses without ever seeing them, but I had a supportive partner. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I was in that relationship for 13 years. And then I moved back to New York when that no longer was serving me. And we were just not aligned. And, you know, I was in New York for a little while, and then another partner lived in the Caribbean. And, you know, okay, that sounds terrible. Let's skip the cold winter. So, you know, we lived part-time in the Caribbean, part-time in Canada, and part-time in New York. And so, you know, it's like, it's a culmination of the ability to work remotely, which I didn't have until I chose to, starting in like 2016. Because historically the ad agencies and the Fortune 100 companies that I've worked for, they want to see you. So most of my life I worked Monday through Friday, you know, pretty normal hours for advertising, which is like, you know, 10 to 8. And, you know, they didn't love the fact that I had to leave early on Fridays to take a bus back to Pennsylvania, but they accepted it. And I think part of that is being good at what you do. So that's helpful. And I made, you know, solid cash. It's funny, like in hindsight, not as much as I should have, because in 2016 and 17, I started really interviewing male cohorts that did the same thing and found out how much more they were making, because they told me honestly. And I was like, oh man, like, you know, part of my passion project is supporting women at talking about money, because you teach what you need to learn. And, you know, it's hard for us. It's super hard for us. And you would think that someone who's been consulting for 20 years would be great at it. Still hard for me. Mm-hmm. And so I often feel incredibly empathetic when I hear, you know, 20, 30 and 40-year-olds say, I can't ask for that. I'm not worth that, or that's too much. And I always just say, lean into your research, go look at the data, do your homework, know what they're paying someone else. Because when you know that, you can say, oh yeah, that's what the job pays and should pay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was a very long answer. I'm sorry, Bettina.
No, that is a very good answer, because you hit so many good points with your own time, and how yet one person said, stop learning and start doing. Like just that point alone is the mic drop. You can do an entire podcast on action, and that it is really nice to learn things. There are people that love to learn. I'm one of them. I have, more degrees than a thermometer, whatever they're saying. Like I just have letters and letters, but it's just the point that until I do something like this podcast, nothing moves, right? Nothing changes. And so that's what I really love about what you're doing. In that moment when they said, start doing instead of just learning, did that give you a scare moment, or was it yes, absolutely?
I mean, I had been terrified. I'd wanted to do this for like 4 years. When I was 30, I hired a research company and used money from a couple of other people. And we all pooled our resources and we bought a 24-unit building in Syracuse. But you know what? I let someone else handle the negotiation. The property management was a disaster. And what did I learn? I learned to be way more careful about my partners. Yeah. You know, I mean, the good news is, you know, the investors are still friends to this day. I didn't lose friends over it. But I learned it's better to direct your own ship and be careful. So, I mean, that I got lucky, but going out and buying a house, like in hindsight, I'm like, why is that so scary? I was terrified. I mean, I literally was so sick the day I closed on my first house. I thought I was giving myself shingles. Like I was definitely having a really stressed out reaction. And the funny thing is like, why? Like I actually found that Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae loans, if you're a first time buyer and you have good credit, you can do no money down home buying. Like that thing still exists, right? And back then it was 3%. Mm-hmm. I was like, wait, I can buy a house for nothing. And then my plan was always to put renters in, so the renters paid the mortgage. Mm-hmm. So, and I was very aggressive. Like I knew I wanted to be done by the time I was 55. So I put everything on a 15 to 20 year mortgage. So that's nice. I mean, it means that you don't make money while you're doing this, but I had a job. I don't need to make money. I have a job. Those are like my personal forced savings bonds. And they're honestly very calming. Like to know that you have an investment that's not like the stock market that's just going to vanish, because I've had that sort of fun as well. Like this to me is like a very secure CD that eventually will pay dividends.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was important to me. But meanwhile, like I love to write. I worked in advertising. Words are a passion. And to your point, like, connecting was sort of like a secret sauce to how all of this came together, so to answer another question that you haven't asked, you said, what are the hard things that create change in people's lives? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is, at this point, it's going to be a smidge cliche, but, COVID helped me realize how deeply lonely I was and how like I missed connecting with people. And I was in a relationship that wasn't feeding me 3-dimensionally. And, that person was struggling with COVID in a completely different way. And so I ended up just starved for human connection that was, grounded and relational, give and take. And so I was in a writing workshop basically for 6 months, and they asked us, like, what is your secret sauce in life? And my secret sauce in life is I have, on one hand, I aspire to be Mary Poppins. I want to magically make your moment better if I can. So if you're like, I really want snacks and it's 2 a.m. and you're in a bar, I will possibly have snacks at the bottom of my bag. I'll be like, oh my God, I just grabbed these at the deli for tomorrow, but we can have them now. Like, that's such a great moment when you can make that person happy.
Yeah.
And then my other secret sauce is I love random connections in life, and I try to stay open, because you never know who you're going to end up talking with, at a coffee shop. You never know who you're going to meet in a bank. Somebody's sister could be dating someone that they break up with you, and that's your future husband, or someone knows someone that's about to hire you. Like, I love that feeling in life. And I want to inspire more people to actually not be so afraid of each other, like stay present, like have some fun with it. And it's hard. I get it. It's hard sitting on the couch, doing Netflix, playing with our phone and looking at like silly things on Instagram. Who doesn't love that?
Yeah. There's not as much risk with it. There's not rejection with that.
And effort.
Yeah.
And effort. Right. So as a result, I wrote a book called, The Big Power of Tiny Connections, How Small Interactions Spark Awesome Outcomes. And it's really about just the tiny moments in life and how they can change your life.
Listening to your story, what kind of comes up is that there can be people, and I have been in that position where from the outside, everything looks successful. Great, but still kind of there's something missing. And for you, it was connection. And you talked about 3-dimensional connection, like just talking about how your day is. Those are words and it's an interaction, but it does not necessarily mean connection. What does connection really mean to you in your own words, I guess?
And if you'd asked me this question early last year, I think you'd get a very different answer than you would get right now. I think connection is like 1 part vulnerability, 1 part courage, your willingness to show up, with the side of vulnerability, and 1 part curiosity, where you're leaning in to wanting to see where that other person has been, where they're going, who they are, and it's a willingness to really be present. And I think it's also, it's all the love languages too. It's like, do you gift with time? Do you gift with touch? Like, connection is three-dimensional when you're in a relationship, right? And even with good girlfriends, I've started to notice how people hug. Someone actually the other day gave me a hug tutorial, which I kind of liked. And they said, if your right arm goes under their left arm and you pull them in that way, your hearts are on top of each other. And, that could be more connective.
Yeah.
And so I love that. Yeah.
And it's so, because I always say I'm super nerdy, but just reading about heart and the energy that you can feel, you can measure the electromagnetic sense of the heart 3 feet away. You cannot really sense all that much from the brain. So it's about maybe a couple inches. We can feel each other just in that connection and build a stronger connection with that. So that is really amazing with your hug tutorial, with your book about connections. How did you kind of talk about different tiny connections or different kinds of connections? What did you find?
So I took people through a lot of different structures. So basically, I've explained that tiny connections can do different things for you depending on what you want out of life. So the question becomes, what do you want out of life? You got to start there. But I did make it easy for people. So I have a chapter on tiny connections will get you a better job. Tiny connections will make you more money, because those two things are different. Tiny connections can get you invited to more parties. Tiny connections can get you laid more. Tiny connections can help you be a better person. So it's really the gamut of how human interaction supports us and can support our journey. And so, on one hand, you have a person that's trying to connect to make more money. I walk through those steps. I give them conversation starters. I suggest where they look. Like, I don't literally give them a play-by-play on how to get a mentor, but I suggest that would be the step, and here's how to go about it. Mm-hmm. And then I suggest how you interact with that mentor a little bit in order to turn that person into a little bit of a roadmap for yourself, and then, as far as just regular life, we're all lazy. We all have that little excuse voice that plays in our head. Like, my personal one is, I've worked a long day. I just want to go home. I just want to chill out, or maybe I'll hit the gym. But there's no opportunity to like meet and expand my life when I do that. How hard is it to say yes to someone when they invite you to something, as opposed to, I'm just going to stick with my regular schedule? Yeah. Like, I have a whole chapter on super yes. And it's, the idea that they have an improv where yes, and like, give it all you've got in that moment and see how it goes. I mean, one of the excuses I hear a lot is, I'm too busy. I don't have time to make new friends. I don't have time to expand my horizons. That may be true, but then I ask them to sort of really look at the choices they're making. And also, unless you have 2 jobs and, kids, and you're just like slammed all the time, you probably are making time for Netflix and chill. You've probably got some other place where hypothetically there's time. And whether you leave the house or not, there are ways to connect with people who can change your life. There's, lunchclub.ai, which is a fantastic way of having lunch with completely random strangers your paths would never cross normally, and you can actually pick, do you just want to meet people socially, or do you want to meet people to change your career, or to at least expand your career sort of vertical? And it's awesome. Like, I've had lunch with people in New York City where I was. I've had lunch with people who are in India where I wasn't.
Yeah.
not at that time.
Where I wasn't.
And you know what? They were really dimensional and interesting conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Super. And that's just, I personally think that's so lovely. Like, didn't change my life in that moment, but it could have. Like, I followed up with one of them, and, it's a gamble, right? And I think that that's what we have to lean into. To your point, I am a risk taker, and I'm open to gambling, because at the end of the day, we're going to win big, I hope.
Yes.
In the connection lottery.
Absolutely. And I think when you're taking some of that risk, you can also experience more joy. And I think for a lot of people, more out of life is to really live versus exist, right? There's a reason why roller coasters are popular, because you're in that moment when you're just not sure. We like the safety net of it, but there's something thrilling about it. Because it gives you that thrill that, just going to work and coming home necessarily does not
absolutely
build that thrill, but you can do things that are uncomfortable. And that resonates with me because I am an introvert. I love my alone time. I recharge alone. And I literally had a panic attack one time having to go to a cocktail party with a boss and the different group. I'm like, I don't know anyone. I don't know what to say to them. And I always hope that that there's someone at the table who likes to talk, because I don't know what to say to them. And now, I am very much more comfortable after putting myself out there, and I have a podcast and I interview people and have conversations. I would have done this without being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and look at the joy that I feel, and the joy that the great conversations,
Yeah. And Bettina, I love that you just shared that, because I think a lot of people probably resonate more with the uncomfort. And I talk about how actually being vulnerable in those moments is probably the most powerful thing they can do. So for instance, you walk into a bar or a party or a work event and you look around and you don't know anybody. Nobody, not even confident people, enjoy that moment of, that like gentle dying sigh. But having gone to enough events where I don't know anyone, I started trying this incredible free range vulnerability on for size. And I would walk up to a pot of people. It was funny, especially women's events. I would walk up and I just assumed they all knew each other because they were just getting on like a house of fire. And I would be like, hi, I came alone. Do you mind if I join your group? And they would all be like, oh yeah, we all just met 5 minutes ago. And I was like, seriously? And this would happen again and again. And I realized they don't know each other at all. But even if you walk up to a person standing, you're at a tall table at an event and you said, hi, I freaking hate chit chat. It's so uncomfortable. Do you believe in red sauce or white sauce on your pasta? Let's just go big or go home. You're going to you've just shared something that you're uncomfortable. That's really human. You've created a vulnerability opening for the other person. And then you've taken the conversation past where they were expecting. Yes, it could take a small amount of forethought, but I think at the end of the day, like, you're going to realize how easy it is to talk to strangers. And there's a study that I included in the book that I found fascinating. Most people, like 90% of people, think talking to strangers will be awful. But once they've done it, they all say, oh, that was great. That wasn't nearly as bad. I enjoyed that. I would do it again. But then when they're re-interviewed 2 weeks later, talking to strangers is terrible. I don't want to do that. And when they were asked why they were sort of horrified at the thought, I'm going to run out of things to say. Mm-hmm. They won't like me, or they're going to be boring and I won't like them. But literally 100% of the time, people were like, oh, that's so much better. And it was actually really interesting. So it's like some part of us just needs to be like, you know what? I got this. Let's do it.
Yeah. And I think what's also great is that, your father was in marketing. That's how you moved around. You shared that you were in advertising and marketing, like for and I'm somehow in marketing as well right now, even though I'm a physical therapist. To think that someone in marketing also has to figure out how to talk to people, like, it's not always a natural thing.
Oh gosh.
And even with words, that they're powerful, but you've done this for, you said 2 decades of writing, and words are your friend and your passion. And then you're in another workshop for 6 months. Like it doesn't stop, right? We can continue to learn, and you're doing that action. Share with me, but what else have you done with your words? You're writing this book. Share when it's coming out. What's going on?
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Bettina. So it's coming out right at the beginning of January. It'll be for sale in your local bookshop. And if it's not there, just ask them to order it, or it'll be on Amazon, and it'll be in all the formats, the ebook, the hardcover, the soft cover. And then my audiobook, will be out, I think, end of February. We're going to stagger that a little, give a teaser. But like, I am such an audiobook fan because I love to be able to multitask and drive. I was like, well, we have to do the book in audiobook. Plus, one of the really fun things about this book is, there's a lot of insight into how people connect and practical tips on, how to connect without leaving your home, and what works for offices. It's both, corporate and personal, but there's stories. Every chapter is crammed full of stories. And it actually says, let me tell you a story. And I tell you a personal story from my life, or I tell you a personal story from someone that I interviewed whose story was just so aligned with that chapter, I couldn't help but share it. Yeah. So it's really a fun read. It's the kind of read that I think is going to change your life, but also just engage you. Yeah. So the other way that I use words is, so I'm an executive coach, and I currently do corporate trainings around storytelling, because understanding your audience and really landing with them is super powerful for salespeople, new business people, account people, basically companies who are trying to create connection with their audience, no matter what they do. They could be a car salesman. If you want to improve how you connect with people, you have to look at story archetypes. Yep. And you have to look at how that's connecting. And so I go into large companies and I use my words, but then I also really listen, because I do one-on-one coaching sessions with the employees and help them shift. And that's so powerful, because I get 30 minutes with them, and then a couple of days later, I get another 30 minutes with them. And it's amazing to watch how much more comfortable they feel, how much more grounded, how they've adjusted the story that they're telling me. It's awesome. So I really get to watch my words support and change people's lives.
And that's always a treat, that in that place where you realize all of the pieces of your life have come together, and you get the 30 minutes and 30 minutes again, of course, with instruction, and you see the shift in their life, which will continue downstream. And so that is super, super great. So you're consulting, you're real estating, you're speaking, you're authoring. What is on the horizon, or what is in the rising for Jen Nash still? What are your goals, or how are you going with the flow?
I love that question. That's kind of hard. Good job, Bettina. Throwing me under the spotlight. Like it. I think so with the realization that connection is so important to me, I realized that some aspects of my life were not feeding my need for community. Mm-hmm. And so while I do love to move around, I think that there can also be a way to do that and live in different places, but to be fed by communities in those different places. So I think my goal for the next couple of years is to figure out, where do I really want to ground myself? Do I still love New York? Because I spent 3 months in LA this year, and I absolutely fell in love with San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. And I literally am my mantra is Mexico will save us all. And seriously, gave me so much grounding. And I as a woman who has financial insecurity bred into me, I think genetically by my mother and my grandmother, I was oh, you could also just go live in a country where what you need is half or less than half. Yeah. How have I not thought of that? And it gave me so much calm. And I think part of that actually really inspired me to be braver in terms of some of my choices. Because I'm all right, we're not going to be poor and living in a friend's basement. Let's be real. Because even if I have a multi-million-dollar portfolio, you still have these crazy fears that run through your head. And I don't know why it is. But I do think it's actually genetic, because my grandmother had financial insecurity. My mother had financial insecurity. We've all been fine. Yeah. But nonetheless, our worst nightmare is you're going to be homeless and eating out of trash cans. That's not happening.
Yes. I hear that. I do think there's, that we carry the fears from the generations ahead of us. And that's what I think resonates with a lot of people as well. Especially when it comes to connecting and feeling you're worth the connection and worth having this kind of connection, right? And even having the feeling if I'm worth this connection, am I worth something in other people's eyes, as on 3 dimensions, but also just spiritually and financially. And it's a lot of working together. And it seems like what you shared in your vulnerable state, if I say you're bold and direct and courage, is that, you have, and in so many ways, been successful, but also still carry and have to address some of vulnerabilities and insecurities, regardless of whether it's successful or not, and that is just, it's okay that it happens, but you're still being bold enough to learn and act even with that. Yeah.
Thank you, Bettina. I received that. That is a lovely compliment. And I can't say it was like super easy. Like I had a really bad breakup and that stuff throws you, but I think to your point in terms of like, how do you want to rise? Like you really have to look at what do I value in my life? What do I want more of? And where am I willing to put time, money, and love, like my heart, my passion, it's effort, but it needs to be coming from that space, right? What's going to move me forward there? And I think while I worked in corporate for 20 years, I've been coaching people for about 4 years now. And I didn't really carry a proper container for it until like basically last year. And I am loving leaning more into that. And it's funny because like, I kind of was like, coaching, that's a fad. And then I got a coach. Seriously. Then I got a coach and I was like, oh, I get this, and it's funny because you talk about worth. I think on one hand, I wanted to share that like so many people don't want to talk to strangers because to your point, they don't think they have anything to offer. Mm-hmm. Just being them is not enough. Yeah. And if that resonates with anyone, I just want to tell you, you're forgetting that you showing up is bringing your light, like who you are. And maybe all it is making someone laugh, but maybe they really needed that laugh in that moment, Mm-hmm. And like, I have a young woman who I mentor, and it's fascinating to me how she gets really stressed out on job interviews and thinks that she's wasting their time. Mm-hmm. And I have to constantly remind her, these people are dying on the vine. They're so busy. They are dying to get you in there. You are going to make their lives easier. It is awesome that you are showing up and they are excited to meet you. How could you possibly think you're wasting their time? Like, don't come at it from that angle. And I think we just have to remember, I call it a work win list, but I think we could also just have a me win list. If you're suffering with any of that, I highly encourage people to like write down good shit that you've done and that you've said and that you've shared and stuff that at work people had complimented you on. Write down a little win list, keep it on your phone, put a Post-it note somewhere where you see it all the time. So you can be like, that's right, I did increase sales 6%. That's right, I did lower the cost of that. That's right, I did introduce those two people and they got married. Like, I'm an awesome person.
There were so many good parts to this conversation, and I really wanted to point out that our conversation lasted a lot longer. It was just one of those conversations you enjoyed having that you really didn't want to end. And Jen Nash is just someone who has a lot of energy, but because of that energy, there was a story behind it. There were some disappointments, and she shared some of that on her podcast with me today. And so I wanted you to also learn more about her at jennash.com. She does corporate training, speaking, executive coaching. She's written a book, and she has really great testimonials to helping people feel more fulfilled, because you can have everything that you want, the degrees, the relationship. Yes, check mark this box. But do you feel connected to really what your hope of a good life is? And that's where Jen Nash comes in handy. And so if you feel that you really enjoyed this conversation, or someone that would benefit of this podcast, if you feel that you've benefited from this podcast today and feel that someone that would benefit, please share it. To put this episode in the hands and ears of someone that it can make a difference for, may have untold consequences in a good way. And I would also love for you, my ask is to leave a heartfelt, honest review, either through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, to help boost this podcast and put it in more hands and ears of those that really may benefit from it. Help them in their own rise to achieve a life that they're really excited about. And lastly, thank you so much, because the one thing that we cannot get back is our time. And so I thank you for the time you've spent here today. And I can't wait to talk to you next time. And until then, let's keep building one another up.